to Rocking the Journey podcast, the podcast from Rock My Age. And today we're going to be speaking about the big M, menopause. And most specifically, we're going to be talking about menopause in the workplace, whether we should be taking it more seriously or whether we should all really just get over ourselves and just get on with life and do our jobs and not talk about these kind of things. So I'm really delighted to be joined by my co-founder of Rock My Age, Erica, and Deborah Garlick, and she's from Henpicked, which is a company that runs menopause courses. Didn't even know these existed. Menopause courses in the workplace, and for some really big clients as well, which again, I was quite surprised at, but I'm sure Deborah's going to put me right in a minute. So welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Lovely to see you. Now, starting with you, Deborah, menopause in the workplace. Now, there was a great article by the former editor of Vogue talking about, shouldn't we just all get over ourselves, forget talking about menopause because it makes middle-aged women less employable, and just focus on other things. It's not very interesting. It's just a small part of life.
Wow, where do you start with that? So many different things in there. And yes, of course, menopause has always been around. I did see that article and I agree. Menopause has always been around. As long as there have been women on this earth and as long as we've lived long enough, there's been menopause. So absolutely agree with that one. But actually, we do live in a very, very different time. Now, if we go back in time, for example, around about 100 years ago, women tended to experience menopause at 57 and died at 59. That's not very great, is it? You know, it's quite obviously something that's towards the end of our lives. Whereas today, the statistics we were talking about earlier, Debbie, we tend to live on average to be 83. We stand a 1 in 6, 1 in 7 chance to live to be 100, and we experience menopause on average at 51. So it's towards the middle of our lives rather than towards the end of our lives, but actually we've not really adjusted our thinking towards that.
And a really interesting stat on your website, your brilliant website with lots of content around menopause, is that 1 in 100 women experience menopause before the age of 40, which I thought was really surprising as well.
Early menopause is something we're very passionate about at Henpicked. Happens more often than you realise, and it can have devastating consequences, because for many of us, when we're coming up to 50, when we're coming up to that menopause age, we're kind of expecting it, not always, but we kind of are expecting to be coming into the menopause transition. But for the 1 in 100 that are experiencing menopause before their 40th birthday, or the 1 in 1,000 that experience menopause before their 30th birthday, and it's often diagnosed at the point of the question, why can't I get pregnant? Yeah. So for many, it's a double whammy of you're not going to get pregnant, and for that matter, you're menopausal. Yeah. And that can have devastating consequences, not just on the individual, but, you know, think about partners, family, etc. We really do need to understand early menopause more and talk about it.
It's a really great point. I just want to bring you in, Erica, because you're a great example of somebody who has run a big brand company and top of your game. And what was your experience of going through this stage of life?
Yeah, so welcome both. Well, hello both. I think I went through menopause at around 55, 56, I think. And I didn't actually have too many symptoms. I had the odd hot flush when I was in a meeting. And that was kind of quite interesting, actually, I think, because you suddenly realise you've got another distraction or a story going on when you're running meetings. And I found that quite interesting, actually, thinking there's a little element of, oh, is something going to happen today? Or is something going to happen in the meeting? So I found that quite interesting to go through. I was very lucky, as I said, I didn't have too many symptoms. And then I think also the other thing was sleep was affected. So I think when you're running a business, it's so important to get really good sleep. And I found that really difficult. I have to be honest that we had quite an open culture and conversation, and ours was quite like a family, our business. I think people probably talked in small conversations, probably around these things. But I'm actually thinking it wasn't something that was a mainstream conversation for us, even though we had, I would have said, balanced women and men in the business. So I was interested in what your sense was around that, around the what sort of conversations happen in a business, about menopause. It's not something that I had a narrative around, so I'm kind of fascinated about that.
So organisations, and I know I've seen some tweets recently about why aren't employers talking about menopause more now? And actually many are. And there's very good reasons why they're talking about menopause. It's great to hear your experience, Erica, but so many massive organisations really do need to get the conversation going for demographic reasons. We're an ageing population in the UK. We need to retain more women and talent in the workplace than ever before. Very good business reasons, and Debbie and I were talking earlier about the statistics around absence in the workplace, and there's not definite numbers to say this is how much or how many days off that individuals take, but nevertheless we do have information that says women take time off during their menopause and don't always disclose the reason why. Our experience would be that so many women don't realise what they're experiencing is the menopause because there's so little known about it generally, societally, not just in workplaces. And so it's great to see how many organisations are talking about menopause, and very large organisations too. So I know we started 1,000 organisations on the journey to become menopause friendly or menopause aware. And this year, throughout lockdown, we've trained thousands of colleagues, and what they're doing is putting, I'll say policies, it's not law to have a policy, but policy or guidance or fact sheets, making those available to colleagues. They do running training so line managers can understand what's actually going on and how to support somebody if they're experiencing menopause and they need things like reasonable adjustments, for example. And predominantly they're doing it because they believe in looking after the well-being of their colleagues. That's the most compelling reason all of the organisation, those that are taking the lead with menopause awareness, are doing it because it's simply the right thing to do to look after the well-being of their colleagues.
It's such a lovely way to put it. Now, I want to bring men into the conversation and just share with you two stories that I've got. One is a client I have who is a healthcare company, and the manager is a guy in his early 30s, and he is managing healthcare, a big female employee base, and quite a few midlife women. And he came to me and said, well, this lady's going off a lot and she's got menopausal symptoms. And he said, why don't we just get her to take some of those tablets? So I said, right, I don't think you're the right person to have this conversation. And he said, well, why not? I want to be a good manager and I want to, take care of my staff and everything like that. So I felt quite ashamed. I thought, why am I getting this young man who wants to engage and wants to do all this kind of thing and telling him not to? So what's your thoughts about bringing men into the conversation, Deborah? And do you do this?
We do, actually. We have a lot of men that come to our training sessions, and I'll talk about men and menopause very shortly. But kudos to that line manager that, from a sense, he wanted to do the right thing. He just didn't necessarily have the right approach. So you've got to forgive that one if the sentiment was there. And it's not the first time we've had line managers saying before, why don't all women just go on HRT and be done with it? Or some managers not wanting to talk about it at all because they think they might embarrass somebody or make them feel cross for talking about menopause. So if you're starting the conversation, kind of sometimes you have to be a little bit forgiving that you're going to make some missteps sometimes, aren't you? But actually, understanding the symptoms of menopause, understanding what would help if somebody is experiencing menopause is actually what we do train line managers on, understanding why we're talking about it from the first in the first instance, but then what would genuinely help and how to start that conversation. Because, you know, sometimes line managers say, and I had this one and I was thinking, I'm not sure how that conversation is going to go, because this line manager said, how do I tell a woman she's menopausal? And it's like, be careful. And we said, well, you know, how would you know? And the symptoms are so vague sometimes, aren't they? You know, somebody could be looking tearful because of something that's happened in their lives, or they could be experiencing hot flushes for some other condition that's going on. So we always encourage them, it's not their job to diagnose for a start. It's not their job to recommend the solution, which so many people very often are tempted to do that, aren't they? Have you tried HRT? Well, actually, we'll all be different in our personal philosophy there. Some of us may take HRT, some of us may not want to, some of us may not be able to. So understanding what their role is in that, and the conversation is much more human. How would you want somebody to talk to you? So to be much more of an open conversation around, and when I say open questions around, how are you feeling? This is what I'm observing, and get them to talk through.
It's a minefield, isn't it? So Erica, what's your view about, because I was brought up in an Irish Catholic family, and definitely, I mean, I really fight myself that I do think it's really important to talk about menopause, and for us women to really lead the way for the next generation, to say this is a part of life and these are the issues. But I do recognise that kind of embarrassment, the fact that you can so easily, as a man, you can so easily get it wrong. And also a little bit kind of, you know, is this just a bit too personal? I think what's your view on that, Erica?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I was, because Debbie, you and I talked about this a while ago when that article came out, and I was thinking back on my relationships, well, certainly since menopause anyway, thinking I am less likely to talk about menopause with a partner than I am with my girlfriends. And that's just me, but that I've recognized that. I was thinking about it and I thought, no, because I would definitely have conversations with my girlfriends about menopause, take advice, discuss. And actually I was going to ask you, where people do you find tend to go? Is it to doctors to get advice, or is it actually from peers? Because my own experience is we tend to help each other and to share about where we would go. And also just, you know, things about HRT versus bioidentical, although I know some people say really it's all the same thing. And also the myths about menopause in that context. And also I think some people are very nervous about taking it. Some people just go, you know, as soon as menopause hits, I'm taking HRT. You've got the spectrum, haven't you? From and everywhere in between. So I found it very hard to make a decision about it. I found it actually quite hard to find where to go. I found it quite hard to navigate the NHS to get really good advice on menopause. So I was kind of interested. So that's my own experience of discussing it with people, definitely girlfriends and peers. But I was interested, is that natural, normal, or is it, you know, a mix?
I think there's more of a tendency not to talk about it. And I know Alexandra Schulman was saying, you know, she thinks it's an uninteresting conversation when she talks to her girlfriends. To be much more about whether they put olive oil rather than butter for roasting potatoes rather than menopause, which is an interesting thing.
If you cook, of course, it's okay.
I know. I'd rather she didn't have that conversation with me. I'd never cook. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's a lot going on with all of this. And I know when we did the research for the book, Menopause, The Change for the Better, we pulled a lot of authors together and we said to them, what's going on here? And they were all in very, very different camps. And what was obvious was that those that experienced the fewest symptoms had the most positive outlook to it. So you'd hear about conversations about second spring and feeling my zest for life. This is finally the time that I'm going to get some time for me. The children have grown up and gone. Whereas those that were experiencing symptoms or feeling completely polaxed or confused, even lost during their menopause because they didn't know enough about it, didn't know who to go to, they had the more of a negative outlook. And you can understand that when you know, if you're struggling that much, you can't see the wood for the trees, you can understand how they get there. So when people say, can you stop talking about it? I think I'm probably in the place of saying, I'm looking forward to the day when I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
And for me, that is, and, you know, from a workplace point of view, I know that very, very, very much in the early days, I went into a male-dominated organisation, public sector, and somebody said, will you please stop talking about this? I've spent my life climbing this greasy pole, and now you're making me look weak. And I don't want to be showing any sort of weakness that stops me from getting up to that next thing. So you can understand that. But then the flip side of that is that when we look at how many women do feel disabled, if you like, disabled by menopause, suffering with symptoms, 1 in 4 considers leaving work during this time, and doesn't necessarily get the help and support that they need, that I'd like us to get to the time where we say, of course I know all about menopause symptoms. No, I knew what to expect and I knew what to do about it. No problem. We're a long way off that one yet, probably quite a few years. But when we're at that point, then we can stop talking about it. It'll be normalised. It'll be as every day as talking about the weather. So for me at the moment, it's essential to keep talking about it, because I hear what people are saying about don't talk about it because it's making us look weak. But on the flip side, we're not supporting those that genuinely need the help for something that might just simply be a bump in the road during their career.
So I just want to pick up on Erica's point there, because I think that's such a good point about, you know, HRT for a start, and the fact that and I share Erica's view of this about having to really, and I was a health specialist journalist, so understand how to read medical research and things like that. But it was really difficult to get the information to say, do I want, because I think for me, it's all about being informed. So do I want to take HRT or not? But the GP says, yeah, there's a risk of breast cancer. And so you're kind of really lost at that point. You have to really, I think, work really hard to find a specialist menopause doctor to give you the right dose and to understand what your personal risk is as well of breast cancer and taking HRT. And I think that really does need kind of opening up, because where are women going to go to find that information? I mean, Erica, is that your experience?
Definitely. And so I think it's really interesting, because we are hopefully reasonably intelligent, educated people, and we have got a lot of access to information, and yet I still think it's really hard to find your way through this. And I obviously read up, and then people said to me, well, take natural progesterone, and I thought, well, why am I? It was the why for me, like, why am I taking it? I don't understand. Shouldn't I? Have I got something missing? What are my levels? I just didn't know. So I actually remember buying these little pots of natural progesterone, and I sort of put a bit on, and a few years I thought, well, I feel all right, but don't know. I have no idea whether it's good or not for me. No idea, but someone said it was okay, so I took it. And that's not a good thing to be doing if you don't really know what you're putting in your body. That was in the early days. And then I had a good friend, who recommended me to a lady who specialises, her name's Anura Rasu, in bioidentical hormones. And she does a very thorough process of looking at you and the impact of your hormones and age, just generally, not just hormones. So what is your whole body going through, and I felt a good diagnostic on diet, bone density, all of those other things that are going on at the same time. And yet a lot of my friends take natural, do the HRT route to testosterone, which I tried, could not get on with. Twice I tried it and couldn't get on with it. So my friends say, God, take it, it's brilliant. You know, you have so much energy, great for your sex life. And I took it and I just came out in complete zits twice. And I was like, okay, I can't do this one. So I don't know. I have honestly a question mark. Jury's still out for me on, am I doing the right thing? I have a balanced estrogen progesterone mix. But, you know, I could go to someone else. They might say, well, why are you taking it at all? I don't honestly know why I'm taking it because I have no symptoms. I know there's and please tell us over those. I know there's lots of reasons why people say do take hormones. But honestly, if you ask me, I wouldn't be able to give them a very articulate, coherent view as to why I take it, other than that I think I probably should.
So Deborah, that's such an important issue, isn't it? And is that something you would cover in the kind of talks that you give and the courses you run?
We absolutely do. And I'd love to ask Erica later. I'll answer that question about the process we take people through. But if you can start to think about what do we think would resolve that, the situation that you were in and countless many other women in the UK, and actually worldwide is our experience, because the rest of the world sees us as ahead in the UK. And the words that you used, Debbie, was the one that we use. It's about informed choice. You know, we are all so different in our experience. We don't all experience symptoms. They say around about 3 in 4 experience symptoms, and that'll be a range from those that might get a hot flush now and then to perhaps 1 in 4 who feel completely polaxed by the experience. So we'll all be different there. We'll all be different in terms of what we might want to do about this, because, you know, I take HRT. I've taken HRT for 10 years. I don't mind. I don't take any other pharmaceutical. So I wouldn't take an aspirin, but I think of my HRT as something that is essential for me right now. But then I also look at lifestyle. So what we tend to educate on is understanding symptoms and keeping track of your symptoms, so you know how what's happening in your body and how you're experiencing this, and maybe even how they're changing, and then the options that are available to you, so that you can do, as you said, Erica, about reading up on those and where to get that information from, reliable sources, so that you can make your own choice then, so that you're much more empowered to have a conversation with your GP or menopause doctor that might say, well, you know, I'm here to talk about my menopause. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I've read up on. What do you think, based on my medical records, is a better route to do that? And then keep track of them until you get to a point of thinking, actually, I feel like I'm at my best. But Erica, you know, thinking about what do you think would help you during this time?
And I do think a kind of, I mean, you are one of them, obviously, a portal, you know, so that one goes to get that, all that information. And really, I find, you know, you can read both sides of the coin on this menopause piece around hormones. So I think it's, at the end of the day, of course, you have to make your own decisions. But I think, you know, the simpler, the better, in terms of, you know, this is the benefits and the things you need to consider if you take this, if you take this, if you don't take anything, you know. So there's that kind of simple. I also, from my own perspective, wonder if there's something that, you know, my own experience of GPs, for example, is there's nothing coming into women that says, if you know, you may go through menopause at 40, you may go through it at 50. There's, you know, like we have breast cancer screening, and we have, what else do we have? Well, colonoscopy,
cervical screenings as well.
Cervical screenings. And, so I suppose for me, there's something that would make it more omnipresent in people's lives if we actually just named it, talked about it, actually, that women were educated in it, in a sense of, you know, things went out at 30. via the GP and said, look, you may be having some symptoms. Do you know what they are? Come and talk to us. Because I found it quite difficult to get into my GP to talk about this. And actually, there isn't anyone that is actually experienced in my GP surgery about it, because I've actually thought, well, I'm paying quite a lot to go private. And when I was working full time, that was fine, but I'm not now. So I feel there's a really big gap in information coming into me and almost welcoming your arms, you know, GPs opening up and saying, come and talk to us about this. And if it's not GPs, then it needs to be someone else. There needs to be a menopause, I don't know, national centre or something that people actually can ring up. They can talk to people, because it's such a big aspect of women's lives. You know, there is that bit, as you said, a lot of my friends really struggled with it. But then there's also that piece for me about celebrating it, actually, which you were sort of saying, Deborah, which I feel is, you know, it's not always about sweeping it under the carpet or having those difficult times, because some of it is about, it's a brilliant time in life. You know, your periods stop. There's a whole bunch of other things that are really nice about it, for me anyway, but I appreciate that lots of people for very long periods of time of their life go through difficult symptoms. So I think there's two things. I think it would be really nice if we had a much more open, accessible dialogue, but proper dialogue, as in, you know, we are welcomed into a centre. I'm not going to say a surgery, but somewhere where you can go and talk to people quite early on about it.
So I guess so agree with what you said, Erica. And I guess it is people like Deborah and her company, and actually us doing Rock My Age, that we are, because I always thought we were like the first generation, you know, who had to deal with all those childcare issues when we were working in kind of senior positions. And I don't know about you, but I was a single parent with 2 small children, and I worked in TV, I had to pretend they didn't exist. And I so kind of celebrate now that you don't have to behave like that. So I wonder if we're the kind of first generation coming up saying, actually, we're not prepared to sweep this under the carpet anymore. And, you know, for whether I've had a bad menopause or not, I care about other women, and I want this to be kind of out on the table. And also that I do feel so strongly, having a daughter and a granddaughter now, that I want to give them a good message, not them to say, oh God, you know, menopausal women, it's all over. It's kind of keep them in the house. But, you know, that really empowering message around that. And I wonder if we've all got kind of quite well, Deborah's already doing it, but what role we play in it.
I love what Erica was saying about raising awareness of it, and we all have a part to play in that. And yes, that's what we do every day, but we all have a part to play in that, because when we shy away from a conversation about menopause, or say, please, will you stop talking about it? You know, we're pushing it further under the carpet, whereas the more of us that do talk about it, the more we normalise it, the better it is for everyone. We can help each other. So I think sometimes we might rely too much on other people's view of, I tried this, try that. You know, we've got to sort of understand ourselves and have really good conversations about it. I had a wonderful conversation with a very young, in my GP, because I still have to go in for my menopause appointment. And I went in and I saw a young locum at our clinic. And she said, oh, you'll have to come off this now. You've been on it for longer than 5 years. And I thought, really?
That's not true.
So I kind of played back to her. She sort of regurgitated all of these facts and concerns and things. And I knew, you know, from our research, from what we know, I kind of said, where did you get your information from? Because you're not accurate. And I wasn't being too hands on hips with her. You know, I was just a little bit concerned that somebody coming in behind me might have an experience that they weren't expecting from this individual. So I did kind of say, can I speak to the practice manager now? I'd like to sort this out. We got it sorted out. And I did say, this person needs training. Not all general practitioners have a special interest in menopause. So the biggest tip is, when you make your appointment, ask who is. Might even be the nurse. But then when I went back into that surgery, and I'm sure somebody's got me flagged, And this was for my acne, because one of my menopausal symptoms was severe acne for about 7 years.
Yeah, which people don't realise this, do they? It can be you have that flare up with at this age, kind of.
Yeah, wrinkles and spots, very nice combination. At this particular time, I went in for my Roaccutane appointment, because they were checking, as they do, they check you to make sure the Roaccutane's not having an adverse effect. And it was again another young locum, and he kept looking at me and looking at the and looking at me and looking at the screen, until I got to a stage of going, is everything all right? Because I thought, what on earth, are my tests wrong? I come back, and he said, I'm just looking at your age, and I don't know if anybody's ever talked to you about menopause, but, and I thought, I like this. This was a young male.
That's nice. Yeah.
And so he would have been your ideal Erica. He was looking at me and thinking, she's over 45. I really need to talk to her about menopause. And so I was going, tell me more. What is he going to say? And I said, this is really interesting. And he said, I think all women over the age of 45 should have an automatic menopause meeting.
Brilliant. We love him.
Ideal. I could have adopted him. It was just one of those moments when you think, and sometimes when we talk about sex and we talk about men, and we find less difference than you might think. So many women might be worried about broaching the subject. Very often you find when we run our training sessions, we have a lot of men and young adults that come to it because, my mum's experiencing this, or I'm coming to find out for my wife or my partner. So, let's not make an assumption that a female doctor is going to be better than a male doctor, or a male line manager. One of the first sessions we did, and this is going way back years, we had a young woman who was experienced her menopause in her 20s. And I got a lovely quote from her. We got her on video, and she said, during this time, my line manager was my rock. Her line manager was a male in his 30s, had no menopause training, but all he wanted to do was understand what she was experiencing and how can I help.
That's lovely.
Powerful human conversation.
And how can I help? Ladies, there's so much to talk about, and I'm sure we're going to do this again with and coming at it from a different angle. But just for now, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation today, and if you'd like to listen to more conversations with inspiring women, do look at our website, rockmyage.com, or register to have them delivered direct to your inbox. Until next time.